we want to deal with an issue that we find is going to take place here in New Jersey starting September, inshallah ta'ala. And it is called the Sex Education Guidelines for the Public School. And from these, we're basically going to take just 3 grades. What's going to happen, or the change that's going to take place within the different grades, inshallah ta'ala. So in the 2nd grade, inshallah ta'ala, which children are roughly about 7 years old, inshallah, one of the new laws for teachers in public schools in New Jersey is that commencing as early as 2nd grade, if a child enters the classroom and wants to be recognized or acknowledged by other than what they are, for instance, their name is Mohammad, they want to be recognized as Amina, or they say they're a boy, want to be recognized as a girl, it is now against the law for parents to openly tell, or teachers to openly tell the parents that their child wants to be called by something different. They can lose their job, inshallah ta'ala, in terms of these things. And in 2nd grade, they want to teach children how to express themselves regarding gender roles, right? For instance, I'm a boy, or I have a boy's body, but I'm really a girl. So the question, inshallah ta'ala, is what advice can you offer our parents regarding their children who will be entering 2nd grade, as a lot of our Muslim parents, and I would venture to say probably 90% of our Muslim parents here in New Jersey, have their kids in public school. And this is a stage where children, subhanAllah, are so delicate. In Islam, they yet are not even commanded to pray. And now we're going to be discussing gender roles and sexuality with them at this very young age, and parents can't do anything about it. So what advice do you give our parents?
I guess Canadian dealing with this for a while.
Do all the sightseeing you want right now, because you're not coming back, Sheikh.
Okay, I kind of start something. I'm not from New Jersey, so there is an aspect of this question and answer is legal, and it has to be referred to someone who have a legal background, so he give you the answer from a legal perspective, and then to review whatever advice you take with the Muslim community should provide that legal guidance. But I want to tell you something that important. It might not be a solution right this second, but that shows us as a community we have to be involved in the conversation. You can't wait until the law is passed and you're not part of the districts or your school district where you can be part of shaping what kind of law and what kind of curriculum, what kind of conversation that you have, building a coalitions with locals. And I know it's different. I live in Texas, so for now we might not have this problem. It's not even in such states, like Florida, you're not allowed to bring these kind of things into the school. It's the opposite. The teacher lose her job if she bring this up. So we might have a different states with different, but that based on the political power behind it. So if there is anything, we can't just ignore the important, because it's not going to stop there. Even if you take your kids to Islamic schools, whatever, it's not going to stop. It's going to continue. The only way to protect our generation and the generation that comes is to be involved and strong and stand up strong and build a good political power inside the state and debate these issues. We're not just coming as backwards people. We have science on our side. We have fitrah on our side. We have the vast majority of people are in general decent people. Common sense. Debate this issue openly. Raise the bar for this to be challenged legally, morally, scientifically. Look for allies, and that will be my advice. That shows a bigger issue to be addressed here, and that's the advice I have for you in regard to this. It might not be a direct or rush, but it's a long-term solution.
Anyone else would like to add?
Yeah, Bismillah. I think I'm going to build off of what Sheikh Waleed was saying, that thinking about long-term strategy, I would break it down into things that are more specific. So number one, investing within our own community, those individuals that are studying political science, encouraging them to become policymakers so that they will have the best interests of the Muslim community. Number two, in terms of the alliances and relationships that we build, I understand the Muslim community has a very turbulent relationship with the Republican Party, but at the end of the day, on these particular issues, you'll find that the Muslim community's interests are more aligned with the interests of the Republican Party. And you can always find centrists within the party that can help you navigate through these issues, so leveraging those relationships. The third point I would emphasize is investing in our own infrastructure in terms of our schools. And I understand that the vast majority of Muslims may not be able to afford it, and that's always going to be a hindrance, but we have to make it more affordable, we have to make it more accessible, and the more we have, the more accessible it becomes. So it's great that we're building all of these masajid, and alhamdulillah, I've been to some beautiful masajid while I've been here, but the reality on the ground is those masajid are empty and they're serving very, very few people. Whereas if you were to invest in these Islamic schools and get professional teachers and admins to come in, you could serve a lot more of the population. So those are just some of the thoughts that I had that I want to build off what Sheikh Waleed was saying. Allahu Alam.
Barakallahu feekum.
I have a question for you, Sheikh Mohammad. Do you think we should talk to the kids about these issues? Is the situation excuse me, okay. Sorry. Do you think that forced us to start this conversation as early as second now grade? I mean, what do you think?
I don't know if we can even universalize the answer. I mean, as you mentioned with Texas, maybe not so much, but relatively speaking, compared to Jersey, I think in PA we have a little bit more, in terms of conservative moral values and social values and otherwise. So all I have, because I'm in that milieu now, in the past 6 years, anecdotally speaking, I felt like 9 and 10 years old, there might need to be, of course, customized, age-appropriate, but sort of immunizations. I won't use the word vaccinations, to not divert the conversation. I think there is grounds for that because anecdotally, I've seen parents and children come to me with these discussions as early as 9 and 10. 7, I haven't seen yet, and I'm wondering if that actually exists. If so, I wouldn't be surprised that it exists in the places where that discussion is being initiated at that early, subhanAllah. I mean, New York, New Jersey, and the liberal-heavy places. Allahu Alam.
Can I follow up? Just as someone that's familiar with Yaqeen's products, I know that Yaqeen's been recently doing a lot of work on this issue. Can you just talk to us about what's available to parents and to community members with regards to Yaqeen's products on this issue?
So for the most part, I mean, of course, there was a repurposing of many staple pieces at Yaqeen. Everything at Yaqeen starts with a research paper in general, and then it gets packaged into either infographics, animations, videos, programs, seminars, curricula, and otherwise. Our set on gender studies and LGBT and so on and so forth, that's currently in the pipeline, should be released soon, very likely within the month. And it takes a very holistic approach because this has to be addressed with so many different issues. And that's of the reasons why Yaqeen has waited till the right people that were onboarded for it, such as Dr. Mustafa Umar, who's been working in this space for about 20 years now, and Dr. Carl Sharif al-Tubgi, who takes a very methodical look at this. I mean, his PhD was in Al-Aqli wa Naql Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah risala on the mind and common sense or the sensibilities of certain places being the ultimate reference point, and why we have to challenge that to begin with and how to challenge that in sort of a waterproof way. And so all of them, alhamdulillah, were recruited and onboarded to put together, insha'Allah, high-grade academic pieces on these. They're all in the pipeline, all in the peer review process as far as I've understood, and those should be packaged out, insha'Allah, into whether conversation decks or conviction circle curricula or high school curricula or other sort of one-offs like the infographics and otherwise. So stay tuned for that. That's all I recall at the moment that Yaqeen has done aside from their webinars and the like.
And based on that follow-up, in terms of when to talk to the children about this, right? I think this is where we get into kind of the upper grades now, the 5th and the 8th grade. in 5th grade, part of the policy is that inshallah ta'ala they have to be able to explain, 1, the human sexual development, 2, what is romantic and sexual feelings, 3, self-gratification. And by 8th grade, inshallah ta'ala, they have to be able to define what is having sexual relations from taht, min khalf, wa min al-fam, just in case there's some kids here, inshallah ta'ala, you know. So how now, when in the Muslim community, and especially amongst many of our cultures, this is aib to talk about. Brothers are 30 years old and never had to talk about the birds and the bees with their father, let alone their mother. So now, how do we begin to address these issues that they're being forced upon us to actually bring the conversation to the table much earlier? Because if we don't have the conversation as home, as Muslim parents, then that means we're giving the conversation, because part of the policy as well is that they teach children who you can talk to. So if you can't talk to your parents, then you can talk to your teacher. You can talk to the doctor. You can talk to someone else who is going to be that guiding figure for you outside probably your parents, who won't talk to you because it's not a cultural norm. So how do we kind of get past that?
I always believe that talking about sexuality is something important to be addressed with kids. I think it should be in every elementary Islamic schools, talk about sexuality from our perspective as Muslims. I think it's wrong to think it's a taboo. If you read the Sunnah, you read the Quran, there's a lot of talk about issues related to sexuality. But if we don't put the right frame for it, somebody else will do. And sometimes we think our kids don't know about this stuff. They do, actually. As early as you can't even imagine how early that they know about this. So it's so important for you to be the one who don't let them get this information about sexuality from wrong sources. You talk to them early, and I think that's where the community comes to provide. It's hard for someone like me, grow up in a completely different environment, to know how to talk to my kids about it. You know, so I need help. Tell me how to talk about it. You know, need materials that help me what kind of things that I can talk about. And unfortunately, we living here, there is a cost for it, you know, and that cost is sometimes it get us out of our comfort zone. So I'm going to be talk about topics and subjects and touch upon some of the stuff that you mentioned, and to educate them. I think part of this education process is to protect these kids, because you talk about people who don't see zina as haram, relationship as haram, so they don't want them to get disease, to get this, to get that. So they will talk about it from that perspective. From our Islamic perspective, we want our kids not to get sick also, but at the same time, more important is to know what's halal and haram, what's not allowed and stuff like that. So I think we have to design that conversation. We have to talk about it. I think if your kids go to school and they're going to be introduced to this kind of stuff, I will highly recommend that you talk to them first about it. And you have the conversation. I know it's going to be uncomfortable. Or maybe you can ask someone else, elders, brothers, or young brother, or youth director, or talk to Sheikh Mohammad Elshinawy, you know, for counseling session, you know. He will be able to help. I don't mean him just as a role model, but I mean people like you know him. He works with youth, and not only to talk about kids here. You know, some brothers and sisters who are psychologists in therapy, children's psychology, need to know how to talk about this. We need these professional people to be brought into the table, to be available in this critical moment in the history of our community here in New Jersey. And we have to act. Somebody have to take the leadership and the initiative to do that. I highly recommend that maybe out of this conference, out of this conversation, 4 or 5 people, brothers and sisters, comes and said, you know what, I will put a task force, I will put a work, I'll bring people to the table, I will have that, you know, resources available for you guys. That would be an excellent. I think it will be a leading work. Maybe it's one of the outcome of this conference. I always love to see conferences and conventions turn to be something that it produce action items or something that can benefit that community. They can do it in their own or collaborate with organizations like Yaqeen and others.
And trying to continue with that really quick, you know, I was having a conversation with an imam the other day, and we were talking about, we went 2 decades back, and we were talking about how 2 decades ago, many of us who had just come into Islam 25 years ago, right, mashallah, we saw what was going on with some of our youth in terms of drugs and the likes. And we've mentioned it to the communities, inshallah ta'ala, that were surrounding us, the youth. And 9/11 hit, and subhanAllah, as the Imam was stating, he says, we became so busy with 9/11 and the issues of trying to defend our religion and that we're not terrorists and the likes. He says, and what we find a decade later, we lost our children because our focus was somewhere else. And one of the things that, that I fear anyway now is that with atheism and stuff being on the rise, that seeming to be the highlight, that we may make the same mistake all over again and then lose our children with something that is a well-oiled machine, right? When we talk about the LGBTQ, it's a well-oiled machine that is a force to be reckoned with. They are really out there pushing their agenda and making it seem as if you say anything, you're all types of phobic, right? So how important is it for our imams within the masajid to use the minbar to educate the masses, their communities, inshallah ta'ala, regarding this? Because I know, we've experienced it, that if you talk about dements over the minbar and things of this nature, sometimes, khalas, it's like afterwards you have World War X out in the, in the hall of the masjid with the imam and the community, because they believe these aren't things that we should be talking about or addressing, especially over the minbar. Because the conference is one thing, this is bigger. But, when we're talking about with our communities now, it's insular, it's in our city, it's in our county, and this is kind of where we can kind of make change.
I'm going to try to address both questions at the same time, inshallah. With regards to the previous question, the way I would frame this conversation into the community to make it more palatable is not just make it explicitly about sexuality, but more about puberty, because that's just around the age that they're hitting puberty, and sex education would naturally fall under that. So in terms of a resource, Sheikh Ahsan Hanif has actually made 2 booklets. He's from Al-Maghrib Institute, and he's done some great work on a boy's guide to puberty and a girl's guide to puberty, and that's something that I think should be disseminated across all of our homes. And look, we don't know how to have these conversations with our kids. But the great thing about this book is you don't need to have the conversation. You just need to help them read through it, and it'll naturally open up questions and naturally lead to discussions. Number 2, again, is investing in human resources and human infrastructure. Just like we've hired imams, masajid need to have youth directors. Think about the concept of chaplaincy. We have it at a university level. Can we bring it to a high school and middle school level? What would that look like? And then also, I know growing up in the public school, we used to have specialists that used to come to our school to speak to us about specific topics. So even Muslim doctors and Muslim sex therapists coming in to speak about these issues from a Muslim perspective. And that's one of the advantages of living in the land of the free, is that you have this freedom to discuss these issues openly, right? So investing in that human infrastructure and getting them to come and speak to our kids, I think will go a very long way. And then the point that I want to conclude with the first part is the battle of the narrative, where you win a narrative when you're first to it, right? So particularly for our kids, if we're letting the public school talk about these issues first, we're losing the battle. Whereas if we initiate and we're there first, you're at least ahead of the game as much as you possibly can. Now, with regards to the second issue, I'll tell you something positive that Yaqeen has done, is that they've created a group of educating imams and religious leaders across North America. And one of the topics of discussion was navigating through the LGBTQ issue. And we saw from that many imams have spoken about it thereafter. So we had even, Sheikh Yasir Fahmy recently gave a khutbah on it, and many other imams as well. So I do believe it's important to tackle these issues because that's what everyone's speaking about. They're very relevant. But what we want to focus on is, number 1, the practicality of the advice and the action steps that we're giving. And then number 2, to make sure that we're not just emotionally riling them up and making them feel as if their identity is threatened, which may lead to hopelessness, but saying that at the end of the day, this is the deen of Allah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect it. Let us try to be the conduits of khair and tools for khair to try to spread that good. So it's not just about speaking about the issue, but making sure we're speaking about it with knowledge and with wisdom so that we're not going to, number 1, harm our own communities, and number 2, bring further damage of misrepresentation of Islam or malignment of Islam by not speaking about it properly. So I think it needs to be done properly if done. Yeah.
And then those two resources, they can be found on Al-Maghrib's website, inshallah.
They're not on Al-Maghrib's website, but if you look it up, a boy's guide to puberty, Sheikh Hassan Hanif, a girl's guide to puberty, Sheikh Hassan Hanif, you should be able to find it, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
My final question before we take a question from the crowd, inshallah ta'ala, based on what you said, Sheikh Navaid. Unfortunately, now we are finding that a lot of our, not a lot, but some of our Muslim children or youth are falling into gender identity problems. And we're getting phone calls from parents who are in a state of emergency and freaking out as to what do I do, right? My daughter told me she's a lesbian. My son told me he's a girl. Unfortunately, the first thing that many parents or some parents do is they have to be possessed. They have a jinn. Magic has been placed on them just because of the reality not striking home just yet. So what advice do you offer these parents who may be going through this scenario right now in their life that is challenging and difficult for them, that can give them some hope, inshallah ta'ala, and some guidance?
I mean, one of the things that we benefited in the Yaqeen Faith Forum greatly from in Dr. Mustafa Umar's presentation on navigating and addressing the LGBT question was the fact that within our communities, there are, just like within wider society, it is actually a very small percentage of people, for example, who live this sort of lifestyle. Whereas the vast majority of the people, over 50%, depending on where you look, what class and what demographic you're looking at, 50 to 60 to 65% of them could be simply sympathizers with the community, or people that are going through sort of a dysphoric phase. Like, I'm not exactly sure where I'm at, but this random Google AdSense, quiz told me this means you're gay, or you're lesbian, or you're this, that, or the third, right? Or you're queer. And so that can be remedied rather easily with those that have the proper training. And so, alhamdulillah, I mean, the virtual world being put on steroids by COVID has opened up some opportunities much larger than we found in the past with regards to, and I wouldn't just recommend that they be benefiting from Muslim counselors. No, they would have to be Muslims that are faith-based in their counseling. It's a very big difference. Because a Muslim can happen to be Muslim, meaning it's like a coincidental characteristic in his identity, but he has, ingested and digested, and it has just flowed through every part of his or her, system, the secular paradigms that, refuse to pass judgment, refuse to, determine rights and wrongs, except what the arbitrary, politically correct and incorrect norms are right now. Whereas someone who is faith-based, who also usually has the training to know what the bounds are, many of the imams do not, right, have this training. They don't know what the bounds are, legally speaking. And also they may not have the training to be able to identify what are the underlying factors that cause some of our youth or adults to gravitate towards assuming that I am what the quiz said I am. So we recommend, and there are many. I mean, Dr. Suzy Ismail was here today with Cornerstone Counseling and otherwise. What I found enlightening was that a lot of times also, in Dr. Mustafa Umar's presentation, he said that a lot of times there seems to be a correlation between those who identify this way and those who are going through certain heightened stressors or borderline personality disorder issues, or being somewhere on the spectrum of many of these mental illnesses as well. And that is not said in, like in a haphazard way. There are numbers behind this. We're not trying to just like dismiss and dehumanize people or otherwise, but meaning it's complex and it may require intricate untangling. And that's why you do want to defer to experts on this, right? And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best.
Jazakumullah khair. We'll take one question from the crowd.
Can I just say quickly,
Go
very quickly, 2 quick points. We have to build foundations before we start dealing with these symptoms. Even LGBTQ communities, or what these guys promoting and fighting for, I understand, but I think they are themselves as symptoms to something bigger, which is the concept of just being completely liberal. You don't obey by God who decide and put the rules halal and haram. The more you make your children and community obedience to Allah and you tell them how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us and what we're slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're servant, that's what Islam is, to submit to Allah. If you build this from the beginning and you embedded this aqeedah, this belief, you build the foundation of aqeedah in the hearts of the Muslims, from the beginning, it became much easier to deal with that. And I will say another quick point, that it is really bothering me, and I'm saying it because I hear a lot of speakers, and sometimes, unfortunately, shuyukh, saying it, and I don't know how can somebody know the ilm, say what they're saying, which is, and I think that can be, I don't have data to support my claim, okay? But this is my assumption, which is the people today count on, feeling is okay, as long as you don't act upon it. When it comes to all this kind of gay stuff, feeling is okay, as long as you don't act. No, feeling is not okay. What kind of religion is saying that feeling is okay? What kind of deen is this, astaghfirullah? Who said the most dangerous thing in you is your heart? Corrupting your heart with these feelings is worse than doing it. That person doesn't understand how the whole system works in Sharia. That's not just the thoughts. That's okay, thoughts, astaghfirullah. But desire, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. What salim means? Free of these desires. The love for haram is haram. A love is an actions. أعمال القلوب أعظم من أعمال الجوارح. It's a higher level, the action of the heart, than the heart of the limbs. I don't know what kind of language that we're using, because sometimes it just melts the whole thing and water it down. And somebody said, khalas, No, if somebody starts loving something and desiring and like feeling so attached to it, that's worse, in my opinion, than even doing it. And I know some of them don't mean that, but that's a very dangerous language. And I think it's not doing any good to our community. As a matter of fact, this language has been used for the last 5-6 years, and I see how it corrupts so many youth that they became now, it's okay, so it's fine, madri ish, it's like not a big deal. No, it's not fine. And you be very firm and clear about it. But I'm saying this because it's really getting me frustrated, like seeing it how common lately it become.
Can I just ask Sheikh to further elaborate on this
Sure,
point?
absolutely.
Because I myself sort of use this language sometimes. Sheikh, so how would we differentiate then between the passing thoughts that are dismissible, right, al-khawatir, and between a feeling which would be haram?
Thoughts are thoughts. It's just a thought comes. Feeling that this is something love, desire, astaghfirullah, and I don't want to give examples. Somebody say, Allah Shaykh, I desire to sleep with my father. I'm desiring that. في عاقل في الدنيا will accept that. Will say, it's okay if you desire that. I desire my son. إيش هذا? And he said, well, if it desire, it's okay. No, it's not okay. عما يعميك إن شاء الله. It's haram. أعمال القلوب, this is the heart of there is different. Thoughts is not the action of the heart. It's just a thought. What would it looks like if this happened? That's about it. But desire, it means there is love, there is attaching, there is shahwa. That's what it is. That's absolutely haram. No ever alim fi dunya would say this is halal. Nobody understands Sharia would ever say that. And I'm saying, I know the people who use this language, sometimes they don't pay attention to the difference between al-khatir wa a'mal al-qalb min al-hub. That's why it is so understandable to you and everybody. A'mal al-qulub a'zam min a'mal al-jawarih. You will not be a mu'min until you love Allah and you hate the kufr, before even you start acting upon that. So, and that language needs to be changed. Whatever wording that it needs to be fixed, because in my opinion, not only it's Islamically wrong, it is actually watering down the whole issue. And we think that we're trying to find a middle ground, like we are moderate type of, approach. That's not moderate approach.
And yeah, I definitely agree because action is driven by something, right? The thought is like, okay, I thought to do this and I just kind of moved on it. Rarely people do that, right? It's something that was deeper inside of them that tipped them to that, mashallah, make them bold enough to make that move. And to go to Sheikh Waleed's point, I think one of the issues that we find and issues of, educating your children, I was talking to a parent about this that's going through the situation, and I ended up talking to the child away from the parent, and I asked the child, just, how much Quran do you read? In the English language, forget about Arabic. She says, I don't have a Quran. I said, do you make your salawat on time? The child is 16. He says, Sheikh, I don't know how to pray. I said, can you put your mother back on the phone? And when she put the mother back on the phone, I said, Ya ukhta, how do you want me to assist you when you haven't began to teach your child how to pray and to have a connection with Allah wa ta'ala, right? Which should be done from an early age. And we have to stress this point, inshallah ta'ala. Don't wait until your children have reached an age where they're in puberty and the likes, and then now we're trying to figure out how to change it after the difficulty and the challenges before you. If you do as Sheikh Waleed was saying, you teach them when they're young, inshallah ta'ala, you prepare them, you nurture them, you give them the tarbiyah, inshallah ta'ala, they'll have the tool belt and the accessories that they need for when they reach that moment in time, inshallah ta'ala. Khair? I know the brother raised his hand. We'll take one question, inshallah ta'ala, and then we'll end the session, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. How do you counsel parents who feel like they are being held hostage by their views from their children? For example, if your children, they're not gay, Allahu alam, but they consider themselves ally of that community, and the parents feel we can't express our views not to upset our children. Like you're hostage now. You can't say, listen, this is haram. You can't express that because you'll upset them. And then they don't visit you. They don't want to talk to you. Your views. How can we navigate through something like that?
You want to look this way.
I know it's not easy, and I have parents come to me all the time. And the Prophet ﷺ did say, Al-waladu mahzana, that children can be like a source of devastating grief sometimes. They can leave some very deep wounds in the hearts of their parents. But as one of my teachers and my mentors, Dr. Hussein Shuwalt, once said to me about a daughter that effectively disowned her father, and her father hadn't seen her in 20, 30 years. And her father was dying, and he asked me to ask the Sheikh, does she have a right to my inheritance because she doesn't even recognize my paternal relationship, existence to begin with? So he wanted an answer from a very specific scholar that he trusted on across the globe, and alhamdulillah I was able to reach him. And I said to him, he asking X, Y, and Z, and he said to him, tell your father that, this is from the qadr of Allah, that it takes a great deal of faith to accept. But also, I want to tell you to initiate as best as you can with your daughter. And I know it's hard on the parent because she should be initiating with him, right? He's saying because maybe there are reasons there that you were partially to blame for, that you still cannot see until today. And that could be part of your tawbah, that you're going against the grain and doing what ordinarily shouldn't be the case to be the one to make amends. Maybe you're partly responsible for this, right? At the end of the day, it's not really a riddle why a quarter of first-generation Muslim Americans no longer self-identify with Islam. It's not a riddle. They were never taught Islam. Islam was an afterthought for their parents and an afterthought for their parents about their children, right? Even the FYI, these are the Pew statistics, even the FYI, the Family and Youth Institute, they mentioned that 78% of Muslim American high school students that they surveyed at least participated in at least 2 of the 4 smoking, drinking, drugs, and extramarital relations. And the highest number was extramarital relations, zina. 78% did at least 2 of those or more. But the silver lining here for us, inshallah, is that when they also asked them how many of you got sort of your Islamic background out of the masajid, less than 4% of them responded in the positive. They were not taught anything, these kids. They don't know anything about Islam, right? As one of the scholars, I often tell the story of one of the scholars visiting New York City. They wanted to show him our Islamic schools or whatnot, and he met a girl in 6th grade and he asked her like an ABC trivia question, what's the Prophet Muhammad's last name? She said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And it's like sort of funny, but at the same time, if you don't even know like, Qul huwa Allahu ahad after all these years of Sunday school, what it means, what is the uniqueness of Allah all about, if you don't know the Prophet Muhammad's full name, let alone anything about him, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how can you stand the fighting? You've been given a really bad deck of cards, right? A really bad hand. And so those that were entrusted with these children dealt them a bad hand a lot of times. And so owning that and trying to fix whatever is still within our reach is part of the genuineness of our tawbah regarding this. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but that's what I would advise every parent with. The qadr of Allah, and children can be some of the hardest tests. At the same time, you continue doing your part and trying to make up for lost time. And don't strain the relationship. I would also advise them not. Leave a door open, because emotions aside, you need to mitigate harm. You need to maximize benefit and minimize harm. Most likely the case is, the farther they drift from you, the farther they will have any inroads left back when they see the dark side of this world, right? And they want to make that U-turn. Leave some doors open. Have a stratagem in place for good cop, bad cop. Figure out a way to leave lifelines dangling for them, for inshallah when they finally reach for them, inshallah azza wa jal.
Any final comments from the Mashaykh? Anybody else has another question? In the back.
I guess she wanted to know, like, if, like, being gay or same-sex. She wanted to know if, like, same-sex, like being gay or something like that, is on the same level of sin as, like, drinking or smoking or anything. Did I?
Yes.
Having a sexual relationship with the same sex gender is one of the major sin in Islam, and it is one of the worst. It is even worse than zina, according to so many of the scholars, worse than adultery. And adultery, among the highest or 3 or 5 sins in Islam, okay, after shirk, killing an innocent person, then comes after that is the adultery, according to many of the scholars. And zina is in that higher level. Some scholars said al-liwat, or having a sexual relationship with the same gender, is worse than zina, because it's zina plus. It's adultery plus. And no doubt that it is, regardless of where you're going to put it, it is one of the major sins in Islam. And it is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have not punished people who committed sins with a punishment like the way He punished the people of Lut. Okay? Unfortunately, people today see this as something like, in society today, it's something common. And I have my own theory about this, that it is a bubble and at one point it will go down. Because when I look at history, even in Muslim history, Islamically, at one point, a relationship with the same sex was something common in society. And it was, you look at even other society before, and it goes ups and downs and disappeared, and it didn't last for long, but it is so well organized today, so there's a whole entire machinery behind it, so much corruption. And it's interesting where it's going to stop. Like my son, he was telling me in his high school, they have people, trends that see themselves, for example, animals. He said, and they walk in with a leash. Yeah, in his high school, with a leash. The fairies. They like and walk here. I think in New Jersey, I think, or New York, one of the twos, where they had an incident where a student said she's a cat, and it was a problem because the teacher has to address her as a cat, meow instead of yes. There's her pronoun, and whatever. So it's ridiculous. But at one point, we will come to find how ridiculous this is. You heard about the guy in Japan, spend all his saving, $200,000 to make an operation so he can look like a dog. And walking on four, I don't know if you saw the videos. I saw the videos, it's so disgusting. Okay? And subhanAllah, when I used to read this verse in the Quran, وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَيُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ, Shaitan said, I will make them change the way you created them. I don't think any Mufassirin or anyone ever thought it would reach to this level. But you know what? Alhamdulillah, we as humans, we're very resilient. And I think this will be a stage and we'll go back. Just make sure that you stay anchored. You hold your ground. And don't worry. You have the fitrah in your side. You have the common sense in your side. Even though if common sense is not common, it's still called common sense. Okay? And it will remain common sense. And I guarantee you at one point you will win. But you just stay ground and be firm. And don't hesitate to speak up and to debate. And this being said, a final point for me. With this being said, we have to learn how to be, even with people like this, to be respectful in the language that we use when we address these issues. Sometimes the issue became the language and we fight over. No, with something worse than these kind of things, with shirk. We've been ordered to speak nice and to speak respectfully and to basically address this issue and debate it. Empty wagon make noise, big noise. Because it's empty. We're not empty. We don't need to make a big noise. We can speak with science, with calmness, and we debate these issues, we challenge these issues, and we express our position about it. And also, we are against completely, because some people, I talk about this in media, social media, say, oh, what Muslim have to, they are so upset when they hear some of the du'at, and they talk about some of the du'at today, oh, they should respect. What kind of respect or rights for? For example, we never propaganda, we never agree, we never support any kind of bullying, any kind of physical abuse, any kind of emotional abuse to people, to be disrespectful, no matter how that person is, a gay or not, or lesbian or LGBTQ, all the way to the Z. It doesn't allow you to hit or to abuse or to do things of that nature. Absolutely, we are very clear about that. We are an open society where we have to debate things. We have to raise the value of family, and what family means. Science, common science. I don't want my daughter in second grade, somebody tell her, and I saw that with my own eyes, an interview and a teacher telling when I was born, the doctor guessed my gender, and he thought that I am this. No, there's no guessing. Your gender can be easily identified. You die. You go to your grave, and we dig your grave 200 years after your corpse disappeared, and I will tell if you are a man or a woman. It's not going to tell me you are queer. It's going to tell me what you are. It's going to tell me if you are a male or female. Your DNA. You can argue that. You cannot debate that. That's a science. So these things in our side, we can be just be strong, be respectful, be fair, and we have to address this issue from different perspectives based on where you live and what's the law allowed you and so forth. And we protect ourselves as a community and as our family as well.